Well, I didn't forget about you. I just got lost. Good morning, everybody. It's great to see you this morning. Can I give you a little update on Easter this last weekend? Because I know that so many of you, because you told me, you had friends and family members, people you care a lot about, that celebrated with us in our 7-weekend gatherings last weekend. So our total number, we had 8,500 people part of those 7 services. Now this is how that breaks down. There were a little over 6,000 on site, 2,500 by live stream and by Facebook. And we had, that we know of for sure, some 200 decisions for Christ on Easter weekend. So now the job is to really begin to give spiritual care and to begin to get those people on the grow. Because spiritual growth is just like human growth. When does the work really begin? After the baby is born. That's when the nighttime feedings and the 75 diaper changes a day and all the things that happen. And it's the same in a sense in the spiritual realm, right? On a different vein, let me just say, I had a very unique night last night. Went to the 60th anniversary of the NAACP here in Contra Costa County, and it was a very enriching, kind of enlightening experience to be part of that. And Carrie and I joined that. We have some people that are now part of our church family that give leadership to that, and so that was a great experience as well. Okay, so are you ready to talk about not falling in love? Any knucklehead can do that. Let's talk about staying in love. That's the trick. And it seems like incrementally fewer and fewer people are able to stay in love for a lifetime. So we're going to talk about staying in love this morning. Now, did you know, and maybe I'll frame it as a question, why are 4,000 marriages dying every day in the United States of America? That's a real number. Half of all American divorces, marriages end in divorce, 4,000 every day. Can that many people be bad people or stupid people? No, there's something more, and that something more is what we're gonna talk about today. How can two people be at the altar on their wedding day professing wild eternal love for one another, and 24 months later they hate each other's guts? How does that happen? You say, John, does that happen? I've been in the ministry going on 40 years. Yeah, I've seen it happen countless times. What happened in that 24-month period? We're going to talk about that. Now, why is domestic violence on the rise? Why are people so angry and hostile and hurtful toward people that once upon a time they swore an oath, a vow, to love till death do us part? Do you see what I'm saying? There's a big disconnect. And so we need to flush all the kind of conventional wisdom we see about romance and happily ever after, and we need to look at the one that not only created you and I in his image, but he also created marriage, and he also created love. And so we're gonna look to the wisdom of Scripture, and this weekend we've only got one verse. You say, okay, what is it? Okay, hold steady, we're not there yet. I'll get there in just a moment, okay? Now, the alternative to everything I'm saying is this. Why don't we just learn to stay in love? Because there's 2 things you may or may not realize about learning to stay in love, growing to stay in love. First of all, it's easier. Okay, at some point we gotta grow up. At some point we gotta learn to give love and be in a mature, mutually satisfying relationship with another human being, right? So changing partners isn't the deal. It's actually easier to learn to love the person you're with now rather than consecutively, repeatedly having a change of scenery, so to speak, in who your marriage partner is. Secondly, and this is no joke, it's cheaper. You with me? You picking up what I'm putting down this morning? Okay, it's easier and it's cheaper. Now, we have a wide range of circumstances relationally in a room with this many people. So, about 40% of the adults in this room are single. An undetermined percentage of you are happily married. An undetermined percentage of you are unhappily married. Some of you are divorced, maybe 2 or 3 times. Some of you are a widow or a widower. Some of you are committophobes. You are scared to death to ever commit to happily ever after. Some of you are bitter, angry, and deeply wounded. And then everything in between. So here's the question we're wrestling with this weekend. Is it actually possible for two people to fall in love and stay in love forever? That's the question before us. It's actually, God hardwired us to put it in you and I to want that. At some point, we all want somebody in our life, do we not, to be actually our soulmate. By the way, there's not going to be kind of like an electric moment where all of a sudden you bump into a random stranger and you go, my soulmate, I've been looking for you for 46 and a half years. It doesn't work that way. You grow into being soulmates, okay? Because what is marriage? It is the lifetime promise to love another imperfect person just like yourself. At some point, we've got to be mature enough to look in the mirror and ask this question: what is it like to be married to me? Okay, it's not about fixing them. It's about fixing us. And what does that look like and what does it mean? Because when two sinners say, I do, it is hard work to learn to stay in love for a lifetime. Reach for your notes if you would. We have hard copy as well as a digital option. Now, if every relationship was the coming together or the combination of two healthy hearts, the percentage would skyrocket. But that's not what happens, because almost everybody, and I'm gonna strike almost, everybody that goes into any relationship, you know what we got? We got baggage. We drag stuff and other people and our personal histories into that relationship with us. So I have some helpers today to help us sort of embed these life-giving biblical principles about staying in love. And my helpers are here hiding from you. I want you to put your hands together and give a very warm welcome to Mr. and Mrs. Mugg. Okay, so Mr. and Mrs. Mugg are gonna be our helpers today, a little sort of a visual, okay? And now if you look at them closely, you might say, man, they look like kissing cousins to Mr. and Mrs. Potato Head. Absolutely, that's exactly who they are. By the way, I'm a little bit of a Mr. and Mrs. Potato Head fan, especially in the Toy Story trilogy. I love it. I think Mr. Potato Head was going on an adventure with Woody and Buzz, and Mrs. Potato Head is screaming after him, don't talk to toys that you don't know. You know what I'm saying? So that's her, okay? That's why they're having marital problems. She screams a lot. It's very screechy. Okay, so I want you to see Mr. and Mrs. Potato Head here, or rather Mr. and Mrs. Mugg. And here's what happens in all relationships. We start out with this fantasy, this panacea, but then here's what happens is we're in a relationship with our beloved. You know what we do? We bump one another. And what happens when we bump? Stuff comes out. And we bump again, and more stuff comes out. You say, John, why is stuff coming out? Because it was already in there. Now, I know you think, come on, tell me something that amazes me. I just did. Okay? The bump did not create what was in there. The bump only exposed what was in there. See, right now, Mr. Potato Head is thinking, or Mr. Mugg is thinking Mrs. Mugg is the problem. Mrs. Mugg is thinking Mr. Mugg is the problem in their marriage relationship. And the problem is not the other person. The problem is within. So we bump a lot in relationships, and there's a sequence that once we bump, and by bump I mean have a conflict, have a disagreement, have a fight. All of a sudden, you know, how many of you know it's a massive transformation to go from the euphoria of dating to the quasi-euphoria of engagement to the reality of marriage. And there's euphoria there for the first 6-8 weeks, maybe 3 to 6 months, and then all of a sudden, the bumping begins to happen and the stuff begins to come out. Now, once the bump happens, do you know what is coming out? An emotion, and then you know what we get from our mate? We get a reaction. And that's what shuts us down, the harsh reaction of our mate. And how many of you know that we become connoisseurs on exactly how to shut our mate down? We know what yanks their chain. We know what shuts them down. And often in a relationship, one partner is more articulate and verbal than the other. And almost always in an argument of words, the more articulate verbal one will win over the less articulate or the person less able to express themselves, right? And then the silent treatment and pouting and all that kind of stuff begins until the next what? Bump. And that bump will happen. Why? Because you have two imperfect people that have made a lifetime promise of commitment to one another. Now, he says if she would stop it. He says if she would quit doing that. He says if she would do more of that. She says if he would do less of that. And we're under the impression that if they would change, all would be well with us. And that's simply not the way it is. All of us have stuff within us, and it comes out of us when we bump because it is already in us. Now, to embed this principle, I want you to all repeat a sentence after me, and it has two parts. Here's the first part to the sentence. I got stuff going on in me. Can everybody say that this morning? Go. I got stuff going on in me. Here's the second part that I want you to repeat after me. And that is not my mate's fault. You ready? You have to say it. Ready? Go. And that is not my mate's fault. Some of you are gagging because you have been under a very deep conviction that you married a difficult person. You thought you were like a perfect match, a dream made in heaven. 24 months later, or even 24 years later, all of a sudden you say, I can't take it anymore. I'm out of here, and you go for a change of scenery. Now, I want you to fill this in if you would. If we're gonna learn to build love that lasts a lifetime, in other words, learning to stay in love, we've gotta learn to pay attention to what's going on inside of me. Pay attention to what is going on inside of me. Okay, now write that down, then look at me. This is actually a learned ability because it's a lot easier to blame your partner than it is do the hard, courageous work of allowing the Spirit of God to make us a truly loving, servant-hearted person toward our life's partner. Does that make sense? And when we human beings are at the fork of a road, we're almost always going to choose the path of least resistance. And the blame game is way easier than doing the hard work of becoming a whole, healthy, Christ-honoring, loving human being. So that's the dilemma of Mr. and Mrs. Mugg in the moment. Now, we only have one Bible verse, and here it is. We're in the Old Testament, book of Proverbs, chapter 4, verse 23. I'm reading from the NIV, Proverbs 4:23. It's our only verse, and it has everything to do with staying in love. Above all else, guard your heart. I want you to say those three words with me again. Would you please? Above all else, and then say it with me. Guard your heart. Say it one more time. Guard your heart. Say my heart. Guard my heart. Okay, we've got to learn to guard our heart. What does that mean? What does it look like? We're going to spend the balance of our time unpacking that. But we're not done with verse 23 yet. There's more to it. It says, above all else, guard your heart. And then it gives us the big why. Look at the end of verse 23. For it is the wellspring of life. What is the wellspring of life? The heart, which is the seat of our emotions, is the wellspring of life. Now, we don't mean a fist-sized muscle in our chest. We mean the seat of our emotions, our essence, our spiritual essence, our heart. That's the way the Bible uses the understanding of the heart. But notice, the NIV says, for it is the wellspring of life. Another translation says, for everything that we do flows out of it. In other words, if the heart is the source for who we are and how we behave, we've got to do some heart surgery. And we've got to allow the Holy Spirit to do some heart surgery within us. I want you to fill this in, would you please? I've got to guard my heart. Just fill in those three words. Guard my heart. Now, one guy that evidently had not yet figured out how to guard his heart said this to me, and I quote, he goes, "John, I have been married 4 times to 4 different women, and these pink beads keep coming out. I keep marrying losers," unquote. And he was serious. He was serious. No, they were not 4 losers. And I'm not saying he's a particularly horrible guy, but he completely misunderstands Proverbs 4:23, also what the Bible teaches that real love is, and the kinds of things we need to do to stay in love for a lifetime. Again, it's way easier and much cheaper, okay? So, now, I want you to fill this one in, would you please? It's really key, and it's gonna hurt a little bit. We are not very good at monitoring our heart, but we are very good at monitoring our mate's behavior. Did you get that? We are not very good at monitoring our heart, but we are connoisseurs, experts at analyzing our mate's behavior. And not just their behavior, but the intent of their behavior. And man, we can get nasty in how we attack one another before we ever take a look at our own personal heart issues. Now, let me see if I can explain this thing. In a relationship, we all want to feel a certain way. So, example, in a relationship, you and I, men and women, want to feel loved, cherished, respected, pretty, desired, you fill in the blanks. And we love the way that our husband or wife once upon a time made us feel. But now we're disillusioned because they're not making us feel that way anymore. And we're depending on our partner continue to make us feel a certain way, okay? Now watch this. Our ability to feel certain things, healthy or unhealthy, is determined by the condition of our heart. Here it is. Our ability to stay in love has more to do with the condition of our heart than it does the behavior of our spouse. Please, are you hearing me? This is why people marry, divorce, remarry, divorce, remarry, divorce. They continually think at some point, the odds statistically got to catch up with me. I'm going to get a winner. Well, this is getting expensive. And I'm losing my hair. I'm going gray. Decades are passing. Life is running out. My adult kids hate me, etc. And I'm simply saying it's about the condition of our heart. We've got to quit fixating on the conviction that everything is our mate's fault. Now, not to disillusion, but no amount of commitment can compensate for this dynamic. I mean, people can get into such a hostile, long-term relational standoff that they're practically putting duct tape down the middle of the room, his and hers. Let me probe a little deeper. Some of you right now are probably thinking about what I need is a change of scenery. I need to change my mate because this obviously isn't working out. I say to you with love in your heart as your shepherd that most of the time, the majority most of the time, you don't need to change your mate. You and I need to change our heart. That's what the Bible's saying in Proverbs 4:23 and throughout the whole of Scripture when it comes to learning how to have long-term loving relationships. Now notice the rest of the verse. We looked at it a few moments ago. The last part of it, guard your heart. Why? For it is the wellspring of life. Or another translation puts it this way, for everything that we do flows from it. Flows from what? Our heart. Now, this will transform your life if you're listening carefully. What's in you and me is going to come out of you and me, regardless of who we're with. Did you get that? So you change scenery, you change mates. Your new mate doesn't have the precise same screw-ups as your last mate, but they're gonna have screw-ups. Why? They're a human being. They're also an imperfect, unfinished human being in process. So they're gonna bump you also. Now, they may bump you in a little bit different way, okay, maybe on the back instead of the side, but they're gonna bump you, and what's gonna happen? There's that stuff again. I'm sick of that stuff. She's doing it to me just like the last 4 did. He's doing it to me just like the last 2 did. We hear this all the time. Seldom do we hear, I've got to take my heart before God. Now, we pack baggage from one relationship to the next. Do you recall with me a very wise and understanding individual sharing with us from time to time that if you always do what you always did, you'll always get what you always got? I'm having fun with you this morning. It's true. Insanity is doing the same thing again and again and expecting a different outcome. I mean, who's stupid here? We are. It's time for us to get down to the serious business of growing up in God, and it begins with our heart. What I'm trying to say is this: if what you're doing isn't working, don't just do it harder. Do you follow what I'm saying? Don't just do it harder. One of the built-in dangers of this is we can be so hostile and become such hardened cynics over time after failed relationship after failed relationship that in some sense we'll have these impenetrable calluses on our heart and an inability to give and receive love. It happens. The key is to monitor our heart. This is simple stuff, but it's not easy. God will pull you and I through the tough bumps of our relationship. Watch this. If we can stand the pull, if we will stay the course. This is not for lightweights. And you say, John, I'm not willing to do this kind of stuff. If you're a single person saying, I'm not willing to try to figure out what's going on in here or in here and own it, then I would say to you in love, please do not get married. Because that's what marriage involves. That's what love is. Okay, let's have an exercise here as we begin to land this thing. Let's talk about monitoring our heart. 2 steps. Number 1, fill it in. We got to stop and think exactly about what we're feeling before we speak. In other words, when the bump happens, we've got to learn to understand what's happening internally. Guys, because I'm also a dude, let me talk to the men in the house for just a moment. I hear guys say, John, I am so frustrated I could punch the wall. Okay, I hear that a lot, okay? What I want to do here in the moment, guys, is I want to help you increase your vocabulary. What exactly does frustrated mean? Okay, we have some ladies losing it over here. They're enjoying this. Okay. What exactly does frustrated mean? Well, does it mean you're angry? Does it mean you're feeling left out? Does it mean you're embarrassed, guys? Maybe unappreciated, ugly, unlovable, failure, old, stupid, lonely, abandoned, scared, out of control, jealous, disrespected, picked on, betrayed, insecure, rejected, shamed, humiliated. What is it that you're feeling in the moment? Because you can't begin to move to wholeness till you understand the what, and then the why will follow. But we're dealing with the what in the moment, okay? Now, here's an insight about marriage. Do you know why we fight in the early years of marriage? We fight because we don't understand each other. Do you know why we fight in the later years of marriage? We fight because we do. Meaning we do understand each other. Do you understand how that works? And that is gonna be true even if we swap mates multiple times. At some point, we gotta do the hard work of growing up and becoming a truly loving human being. So step 1, stop and think about exactly what we're feeling before we speak. And what we're doing here is we're identifying our true emotion. In other words, I've got a blue bead and a pink bead. Exactly what is this emotion? We've got to understand that rather than just a blanket, I'm frustrated, boom, slam the door, rev the motor, screech out of the driveway, and don't come home for 4 days. Okay? Until we begin to go through this exercise, we're going to keep doing that vicious cycle of destruction undermining our relationship. Write down this second step. We got to say it out loud. Guys, this is hard for us, or at least harder. So here's the deal, guys and gals. As long as our true emotions are a secret, they are powerful. Why? Because we're only as sick as our secrets. When we can begin to articulate and it's met with a compassionate, understanding response, and this reciprocates, goes both this way, man and woman, then we're just taking at least the first baby step toward the place of health and understanding in our relationship. We've got to own the fact that this stuff inside of me is a me issue. It is my insecure response. I've got to own this, and I've got to get down to work. Okay, we're still with the guys. Now, guys, we've identified frustration as really resentment, but most of men's emotions are about fear or anger. Those two things are often the source. So the guy says to the wife, honey, I need to tell you what I'm really feeling, and I'm going to be blunt with you, and I'm asking you please not to laugh or to give me some kind of a snide, whatever. Okay. Your brother's success, his unbelievable golden touch in life, makes me feel very insecure, and it makes me feel like a failure. Because, honey, you come from a much more successful family than I do, materially and vocational accomplishment and stuff. I came from the wrong side of the tracks. Seeing your brother, who is my age, and what he's done, all the trips he takes, he's so happy, and I'm not, all the stuff he's got, I feel very insecure, and I'm actually afraid one day that you will leave me. And that one day you'll say, I'm not hanging with this loser, I'm getting a guy that I better align with, because this isn't the kind of man that I deserve. Okay, now, I know this is a random example. This kind of stuff happens all the time. But as long as what I'm feeling is a secret, it remains destructively powerful. And furthermore, then we pout. I don't know if any guys or gals in the house are pouters. Don't raise your hand. Do not look at your mate. Look at me. Look at me. Stop it. Okay, look at me. But we pout, we give the silent treatment, and then we find little insidious ways. We become hearing impaired selectively, and we find insidious little ways that we can, in some way, sort of pay back and, retribution. Can we come to the agreement that there are no bad feelings? There are bad actions, but not bad feelings. You know what they are? They're just feelings that are indicating a deeper emotion. It's only bad for us and for our mate if we let those unexpressed feelings fester over time. Okay, let's get back to Mr. and Mrs. Mugg here for just a moment. Mr. and Mrs. Mugg are having a conversation, and these are the bumps that happen, the emotions that are elicited, and the reaction that ensues. So Mr. Mugg says to Mrs. Mugg, when you get mad at me for staying late at work, I feel unappreciated, and I just don't know what to do with that when you're constantly angry. All I'm trying to do is show you and the kids my love, and you're always upset with me. She says to him, whenever you, Mr. Mugg, look at other attractive, beautiful women, I feel ugly and old and insecure, and I don't know what to do with that. He says to her, Mrs. Mugg, whenever you belittle me in public, I feel humiliated and disrespected, and I don't know what to do with that. She says to him, Mr. Mugg, whenever you are harsh and angry with me, I am afraid of you, and I feel disrespected, and I just come undone, and I'm just freaking out here. Sound like anything you've ever been through? By the way, the people that have to clean up this shenanigan you know what we're actually afraid about? We're afraid that somebody's going to come out here, one of our worship leaders or whatever, and fall down. We'll clean it up. We got that plan. We think of everything. Okay. What are we talking about here? We are talking about staying in love. Ladies, please understand, if I may just make this comment on the masculine ego, it comes more difficult to guys, even that are glib of tongue, to learn to express their inner emotions. Please be patient with them. So, Can I give you a good lesson by two bad examples? He has just shared with her this very insecure, threatened feeling, and actually that he's afraid that she will leave him at some point. The healthy response for her to say is this: sweetheart, I am so glad you told me, that you trusted me enough to share that with me. I'm so glad you told me, because I never want to make you feel that way. That's what healthy people do. Let me tell you what unhealthy people don't do, because we've got to learn to stop judging each other's emotions. Remember, emotions aren't good or bad. They're just emotions, okay? What you don't want to say is, well, you shouldn't feel that way. Because you know what we do when we do that? We're just we're shutting him down. Here's another thing not to say, and this isn't just for the gals, though that's the illustration in a moment. It's for both sides of the marriage relationship. Well, I'm sorry that you feel that way. You just got to get over yourself, dude. What are we doing again? We're just shutting him down. And by the way, he has ways to shut her down. Okay? I'm trying to help us understand what Proverbs 4:23 means about guarding our heart. Now watch this, and I want you to fill it in. It is profound and annoyingly simple. Here it is. Healthy, spiritually mature people, when they finally understand how they're making their spouse feel, watch this, they quit doing it. When we understand what we're doing to our mate, stop it. That's what mature people do. They quit doing it. They're paying attention to your heart. And if we're becoming a loving person, do we really like hurting them that badly, dominating them that badly, shutting them down that badly? Is that the spirit of Jesus? Is that the heart of God? Is that what Jesus said? The whole world will know that you're my followers because you have love for one another. Listen, if we can't love our husband or wife in the privacy of our home, our Christianity in large part, I mean no disrespect, our faith in Jesus in large part is a sham. Staying in love is not a marriage problem. It's a heart problem. It's a me problem. And our ability to stay in love has more to do with the condition of our heart than the behavior of our spouse. I read to you our passage again. Proverbs 4:23. Above all else, guard your heart, for it is the wellspring of life. Would you bow your heads in prayer with me?